So this is our first tooling video for the new theme bag. I've gone ahead and done all the pre-work. You can see that in our other video about how the whole bag is made. This video series is going to be focused on all the individual tooled and art pieces that are going to be on the bag. So stay tuned and we'll show you how we take that and turn it into that. So quick side note, this video is going to be more focused on the process of tooling rather than the art itself. Future videos will focus more on the content. Today we're doing the first tool piece of the bag, the cover flaps on the end pockets. Kind of did an adaptive Game of Thrones type font onto the bags. So I'm going to be going through tooling both of those and kind of showing you the whole process for how the tooling goes for each of the pockets. So I guess we'll just jump into it. First thing we're going to do is case the leather. Casing just means adding water to veg tan leather. What that does is it softens up the top of the leather and makes it so that it'll accept a mark or a stamp. And so I've been doing this for a while now, and what I do, you'll see a bunch of different strategies and proper ways to case leather. What I actually do is just use a simple sponge. What I'm looking at is the absorption rate of the water into the leather. So I'm putting enough water on it that after it drinks up everything, I'm watching the water absorption rate slow down. And when it does that, I know it's got enough water in it to take my marks and do what I want it to do. So, and it's not an exact science. There's a lot of forgiveness here. Biggest thing is patience, waiting for the absorbed water to basically become all the way absorbed, and I'm just gonna wait for that leather to kind of return more to a normal or dry color. I don't have to wait for it to go all the way there. Most important thing is if the leather's too wet when I go to tool it and go to mark up on it, it will get kind of mushy. My lines won't be as crisp, but there's a lot of stuff I can do in between marking and tooling while I wait for the leather to dry. So first thing we want to do is tape the back of the leather to make sure that it doesn't deform too much while we're marking on it. So to do that, I use packaging tape. See a bunch of different ways of doing this. Some people use blue masking tape or white masking tape. I like packing tape because it's hard plastic. It doesn't have any expansion on it. And the reason that I tape the back is that when I go to tooling, leather kind of works like metal. That material needs some place to go. When you bang on it, you can get it to bevel. What you're trying to get the leather to do is drop straight down and push straight down, so there's no deformation or change to the overall shape of the piece. If you don't tape it and you do a lot of tooling on a piece, what you'll actually see is the leather start to dome out because you're essentially smushing the material in the middle and causing the rest of it to kind of dome out into kind of a smiley face, which is bad. If it's a big piece and you're tooling in the middle of it, which you'll see me do on the bigger parts of the bag, it's really not that big a deal, kind of go back to normal. But on a part like this, where I want to keep that same outside shape, you know, I put some tape down there to make sure that it doesn't want to do that. So, kind of learning as I go. I'm going to try a single layer this time. Previous projects I've done double layers or whatever the case may be. Also, you'll see me not be super careful with basically the top surface of this bag. When it's in a damp state, it will take a mark very easily, and that mark pretty much will never come back out. It's not the greatest thing in the world. about that. But in this case, the overall look on the bag that I'm going for is kind of beat up and old and marks. So kind of letting the leather acquire a bit of a patina as I go, just to get it a little bit pre-aged by the time it's done. So first things first, just normal paper. I'll link the video or show the video or maybe cut to the video showing how I make all the templates. Happy with that arrangement, just kind of push it down a little bit, make sure it doesn't slide anymore, and then just normal little ballpoint pen, trace it all the way around. I used to use vellum paper. Vellum paper is hydrophobic and would curl up as I used it, which was extremely inconvenient. And I fought it for years and years and years. Finally just decided to do normal freaking paper. And who'd have thought normal paper works just flippin' fine. Leather's too damped tool. But I can basically, while I'm waiting for it to dry, I'm tracing on the pattern. Plus side as well with just using normal paper, you can see where I've marked and made up the pattern. I'm just tracing paper. I used to use it with just a modeling tool. When I did that, could never see where I'd marked before. Don't want to press down too hard. The paper kind of deforms. That's 1, 2, do not want to tear through the paper at this point. Will be a nasty little ink mark on my leather at that point. Well, some guys actually, people with way more talent than I do, draw directly on the leather with either pen or pencil. And then the cut marks that they put on hide where the ink or the pencil marks are, which I'm not talented enough to do. So the cool thing about this is that anybody can actually do this. Don't need an art degree, don't need talent. Most of this is just tracing and a lot of patience. Bam. So there you go. A little hard to see there. It'd be much clearer once we do our next step. All right. Next step, cutting. So those little trace marks become little guidelines for our swivel knife. A swivel knife is just a barrel with a bearing, little finger yoke on the back end, and small little blade I used to notch out the leather. This one's from Leather Wranglers, and I really like their stuff, and I cannot wait to afford more. Got my eye on one of their round knives, maybe a couple more swivel knives, who knows. So I'm gonna go ahead and change the camera angle because I still gotta let this dry just a little bit more, and maybe give you guys a better zoom in when I'm done to do the cutting. All right, hopefully maybe be a little bit easier to see. So you can kind of see the impressions that were left by the ballpoint pen. Now we're just gonna cut them out with the swivel knife. One of the reasons that I like using the sponge method for casing leather is that the leather never gets so damp that I gotta wait a long time to do any of these steps. If I wasn't recording, I'd basically probably be able to knock this whole piece out probably in, I don't know, 20 minutes or so. Swivel knife takes a little getting used to. Definitely a weird piece if you're not used to it. So what I'm doing the whole time is just cutting in with the corner and the back angle here, and just kind of dragging and slicing where all those marks are. Cool thing about a square blade like this is I basically have two blades to work from. So one gets dull, I basically switch to the other side of the blade. Keeps me from having to stop and sharpen. What's nice about a small piece like this is I can actually rotate the work and not just move my arm around. When I go to do the portrait work on the massive part of the bag, the main bag, it's going to be a huge pain in my ass. There she is. Bam. All right. Cool. So, swivel cutting all done. Next step, beveling. And so much pain. So while I've been cutting the outline, basically the leather's been kind of drying a little bit. Still a little darker than the pure dry piece, but it's right at the level I want it to be for beveling. It's a little dark, it's a little spongy, but not super susceptible to marking. And I know you can't feel this, but it's basically like slightly clammy. That's right where I like it to be when we go to do the beveling. So get set up for beveling and let's get started. All right. What up? That was loud. All right. Next step is beveling. So since this is the first tooling video I've ever done, and maybe you've never seen tooling before, put my head down a little bit. What tooling is you damp the leather, case the leather, gets a little bit wet, and then it becomes basically like a moldable clay, where you can basically do a shallow relief carving, where you take the leather and you're just pushing it down in certain places to create the illusion of depth. So in order to do that, I use very, very tiny tools. So probably can't even see that guy. So my lighting sucks. I need to do something about that, but you can see my average tool isn't very big. Largest one I'll use for beveling is probably about 4 millimeters across for smooth. So I'm just gonna smooth all these pieces down. But basically I take these little tiny tools and a little tiny hammer and I just crack on a little at a time, and just little tiny hammer strikes, and that's how it gets done. A lot of patience. Leatherwork is not really a talent. It's more of a skill. If anybody ever wanted to get into this, you know, it's a really cheap hobby to get into. You can buy expensive tools. Like this is way more expensive than I should have spent money on. It's a Berry King mallet. Forget the model number. Based out of Sheridan, Wyoming. But all my first attempts at tooling, I mean, that's what I used. Which is a, you know, poly rubber hammer from freaking Harbor Freight. Good enough. Biggest thing you want to do is don't use a metal hammer. Anything else is fine. You just don't want metal on your tools. And then the other important part of tooling, in addition to like leather consistency and, you know, having something to strike it with, is your background. Realistically, I would actually prefer this to be thicker, maybe like 1.5 inches of granite, but smooth granite top. And basically you're just making sure that all the energy from your hammer strikes don't get dissipated by something bouncy. You want as much energy transferred right to the leather as possible. So let's just get into it. All I'm doing is switching between tools when I need something thinner. So the bigger one helps me cover more area. And the little one helps me do more precise strikes. You can probably see it or hear it more than you can see it is me essentially modulating how hard I'm striking the leather based off the size of the tool. So little tiny tool, little tiny surface area, which means it needs a lot less energy to hit to be able to displace the leather the amount that I want it to displace. Other thing you'll notice as the video goes on is I'm modulating not only how hard I strike based off of which tool I have, but also based off of the feedback from the leather. Because leather is its own teacher. Pay attention. You can see which strikes are good, which ones are creating problems. And as I'm going on, as the leather dries out more and more, I need harder and harder hammer strikes. To be able to get the same amount of displacement. Nice coloring. So I'll show you the result after we're done with the first leather. So you can kind of see what's going on. Other tool I use fairly frequently for little tiny details are just really cheap stainless modeling tools. Sometimes dental tools as well, but those are really tiny details. One letter down. You can really see how much pop you get out of that letter when you go through. Essentially the striking actually burnishes the leather, gives it a shine to the outside and darkens it wherever it strikes. And that's also a really good indicator to me that I have the right water consistency in the leather and I'm getting a nice impression that's going to last a long time. So the rest of this pretty much looks the same as that. I think I've gotten all the tips and tricks, and now the only thing left is to do it. I will save you all the pain, and we're just going to fast forward through this one. And there she is, all done up. One down, one to go. Hope y'all enjoyed the video.